From the Corner Office is brought to you by Synovus Bank, championing business growth through trusted, relationship-driven banking throughout the Gulf Coast region. AG Lafley has climbed CEO mountain, running an $85 billion consumer goods giant, Procter Gamble, for 12 years. He retired once and then even came back. Lafley has also written 2 books, including Playing to Win, where he details his keys to business strategies. The Business Observer writes regularly about winning business strategies in print and online. To read those stories and more, subscribe to the Business Observer. Go to businessobserverfl.com. Hello and welcome to the Business Observer's From the Corner Office podcast. I'm Mark Gordon, managing editor of the Business Observer. Today's guest is AG Lafley, CEO of the Bay Park Conservancy and former two-time CEO of Procter Gamble, among many other roles. AG, thanks for being here and welcome.
My pleasure.
Well, we're going to get into your career, which has reached some pretty amazing pinnacles. We want to talk about that and leadership, but let's get to know you a little bit better outside of work. And we're going to start with the kitchen. What is your favorite meal to cook or prepare?
By far, breakfast.
You're a breakfast guy. What kind of breakfast do you make?
I can do eggs just about any way you want them.
Excellent.
And all the ways I like them.
Love it. Second of, I should have said 3 rapid fire questions. If you had a time machine, AG, would you go back in time or into the future, and why?
I'd go back. I want to be with the founding fathers.
Excellent. Back with the
founding fathers. I'd love to be in Philadelphia, just fly on the wall.
That'd be pretty cool for sure. That would be pretty awesome. Okay, third question. What was your first, or what act was your first concert?
Simon and Garfunkel in the chapel my freshman year at Hamilton College. I was 10 feet away.
Wow. And were they at their peak then, or was it still?
No, I think that it was 1965 in the fall, so you can double check all the musical chronology, right. But I would say it was their first album.
Yeah.
Sounds of Silence, I Am a Rock.
That's some good stuff.
That genre. Yeah.
I love it. For our recent 40 Under 40 issue in the Business Observer, we asked one of these silly questions, and I asked, would you rather see James Taylor or Taylor Swift? Just because I liked alliteration with the word Taylor.
James Taylor.
I think you might have answered that. I'd say out of the 40 people I asked that question, 15 to 20 of them had no idea who James Taylor was.
So I have a photo here of me with Taylor Swift. I'm serious.
Really? That's got to be a Procter Gamble thing, right?
Yeah, Carmen, Electra, and Carrie. Can't think of her last name.
Carrie Underwood?
No. Carrie. She's an actress. She just did a big show that was on Netflix too. It'll come to me. But yeah, they're all very young. I'm much younger. It was probably taken 20 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, I can't remember where I was or what I was doing, but somehow, some way, wherever I was, these 3 young ladies early in their careers were involved in somehow, some way. I have my picture taken with them. So I am really cool with my granddaughters. You are super cool. And it's worth pointing out that a previous guest on From the Corner Office, who you might know,
fellow part-time Sarasota resident, Terry Lundgren, former CEO of Macy's.
Good friend.
Said one of the coolest experience he had as a CEO was meeting Taylor Swift at some type of perfume event or something. And he said she was just amazing and nice and took the time to talk to everybody. So that's double CEOs meeting Taylor Swift.
Well, she was definitely sharp beyond her years.
Excellent. All right, we're going to move on, AG. That's pretty cool, but we're going to move on to leadership. And before we get into your career, one of the things that I've seen you speak about this, and you've written it in your books, is when you talk about leadership, is that you don't believe necessarily that great leaders are made, that anyone, actually they're not born great leaders, anyone can be a great leader. What are some keys to being a great leader?
Opportunity. I think there has to be a problem to be solved. There's a famous line about crisis being opportunity. I deeply believe that. When times are toughest, someone has to emerge, right? Sometimes you're called, sometimes you're chosen. I just think there are a ton of opportunities. And the point I try to make is that, I don't believe we're genetically determined, for these roles, right? They can turn up at your church. They can turn up in your neighborhood. They can turn up in your family, right? They can turn up at school. And I think in general, people express initially an interest in, taking on the responsibility, taking on the role. And then they figure out over time whether they can adapt to it, whether they're effective in it, whether they like it, whether they want to do it again.
Is there a time in your career, maybe it's earlier in your career, where you had an opportunity and you seized that, or maybe you didn't think you could, but then you did? Does something stand out to you in that way?
I don't know why, and I think it would be hard for me to ascertain, but for whatever reason, I started being chosen by my classmates, editor of the newspaper. I was selected captain of my basketball team, junior varsity basketball team, sophomore year. I didn't even know if I was going to start. I was fighting for one of the three guard positions, and my teammates, chose me captain. So things like that started happening. President of my class, sophomore year in college. I never campaigned. I never asked for it. There were times when things would pop up that I would get involved because I felt like, we had to make a change.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So did you take that attitude and that approach to your business career? I mean, how did that sort of develop? Because you rose up in your organizations. Did you take that approach to your career?
The truth of the matter is I was always moved, so promoted, before I expected it or was even thinking about it at P&G. So when I went into a job, I always thought it was 3 to 5 years. And almost always, they would ask me to take the next job. Within that time horizon, I think I've said this before and I've written about it before, but I was very much the accidental CEO in 2000, right? I mean, if my predecessor, hadn't had a very short term that was, ended unexpectedly, I was the wrong age. I was 52 at the time, but I was only a couple of years, 2 or 3 years younger than the CEO that had been elected before me.
Yeah. Talk about that. What were some of the steps that you took? All right, so you're the CEO and young CEO, and you're thrust in this position. What were some of the steps you took to be a successful CEO?
Well, first of all, the call. I was working on a startup, Reflect.com. It was it was a venture that we were going to spin out if we got it started up and it was successful. And I was working with a team out in San Francisco, and I get a phone call walking into the board meeting, and it was from a former chairman, and he asked if I could come back to Cincinnati right away. And I said, what's going on? What's the emergency, right? And he said, look, you got to get in a car, you got to get to the airport, you got to get on a plane, and you got to get back to Cincinnati as soon as you can. And then he said, are you prepared to be the next CEO of P&G? And I basically said, what? you know, where's my predecessor? And he just repeated the sentence. Are you ready, willing, and able to be the next CEO of P&G? And I said, I am. And then I got on a plane with 2 or 3 other colleagues, and I rode all the way back wondering what the hell was going to happen next, right? So I go to the office. We worked late. That happened to be my anniversary. I said, listen, I've got to leave at 7 or 7:30 and go to dinner with my wife. I can come back after that, which I did. And we had a board meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning. I was elected at 8:30. I was in the basement of the local television station, staring into the black end of a camera and being grilled by CNBC. And then I was grilled by a couple of the networks after that. I kept the photo. It's a great photo. I call it the deer in the headlights photo.
So you're being grilled, and they're asking you what, like, how are you going to turn around the company? What kind of questions?
Of course.
Yeah. What's the street? What can the street expect the next 7 minutes? Of course.
Yeah. Exactly. And you have 30 seconds to answer the questions they're machine gunning you with. And of course, I basically said, I don't know. I got to get into that. I've got a lot to learn. Check back in 30 days. We'll have a program together in 100 days. But yeah, it was basically, block and parry. And
you talk about this again in Playing to Win. You talk a little bit about that, but what were some of those decisions you made that first 100 days that helped define? I mean, that was a 10-year tenure, your first go around as CEO. So what were some of those decisions that helped define that tenure?
Okay, well, the first things we had to do were improve our operations and executions. I won't bore you with all the details, but we weren't shipping the orders we were getting. Okay, in other words, we were missing orders or we were delaying orders. And that was worth, as I recall at the time, like 2% of sales. So it was really a poor performance. All right. So literally every Monday morning, every business leader had to go through his or her orders, and they had to, confirm they were going to ship them or clarify what they were going to do to be able to ship those orders. I wanted to make sure that we were answering all customer requests, questions, complaints, in real time, right? So I started listening in on the calls. I started picking up the tapes and listening to the tapes. So I had a good feel for what our level of consumer satisfaction and consumer service was. I literally went and visited every one of our top 10 customers. So, the usual suspects, the Amazons and Walmarts of the world. Although Amazon wasn't that big, they were clearly going to become a player. But, Kroger, Publix, H-E Butt, all the major grocers. I got on the phone with all of the buy-side analysts that tracked our industry and followed our stock, right? And believe me, that was not fun. And I went to all of the major headquarters around the world. I actually did that the first week. I literally got in an airplane. So Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and it was town halls. Listen, make sure I had a good feel for how people were feeling and what their take was on the state of the business and the state of the organization and the state of the culture. And then I guess the other thing I would say, and I believe this is like incredibly important, the only thing I committed to before 100 days was over, was we were going to reaffirm P&G's purpose, values, and principles. Our purpose was very simple. to improve the everyday lives of the consumers and families we served around the world with preferred products and preferred brands that were a better value. Our values were integrity and trust, ownership and leadership, passion for serving the consumer and winning. Our principles, I won't take you through, but I mean, one of the key ones was innovation is our lifeblood. Partnerships, are critical, just basic stuff. And then the other thing I reaffirmed was that was confidence in the organization. We'd been through crises before, world wars, natural disasters, financial crises. In the end, you can take everything away, but if you leave us, P&G people, we can build it all back again. And that was it. Because honestly, half the businesses I'd never worked on, and I had to learn them fast.
Yeah. So you went. I like that because you went high level, saying if you remember what our purpose, our vision, and our values are, we can solve those not lower problems, but those other problems.
Yeah. I mean, the business problems are always going to be with us. If we had a problem, if we had a culture problem or we had a morale problem, which fortunately we didn't, I'm not going to tell you that people weren't surprised and disappointed, right? I mean, our share price had dropped by more than half. The value of the company had dropped from 100 billion to 50 billion. So it was crusher, and 15% to 20% of every P&G employee owns stock, right? So we had a profit sharing program. It was a key part of our ownership commitment. And so they all looked at their accounts and went, well, it's half as big today as it was, yesterday, right?
Yeah, that's a deep breath moment for sure. So AG, moving, again, it's going to be part of P&G, but talking just in general in leadership, how do you define leadership? What does leadership mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of great quotations. You can pull them up with a quick check on whoever your AI agent is, but I like, and increasingly I'm coming to believe that it's a navigation job. It's navigating an increasingly more volatile, uncertain, somewhat chaotic at times world where change is the only constant, and more changes are coming at you like a good video game, and change is accelerating, right? So the job is to navigate all of that and help the team, depending on what kind of an organization you have, how small it is, whether it's a startup, whether it's private equity, whether it's public and big, but help the team make sense of the outside, what outside is meaningful and important. What are the signals? Separate the signals from the noise. What's in my circle of control? Very little these days. My own attitude, my own habits and practices, my own behaviors, and what can we influence, right? And then try to sort through, separate out the concerns, so you really are just focused on the very few that are going to make a difference in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. But I like the navigation metaphor. I think it's apropos. And, some people think of navigating a stream or, navigating with your kayak or canoe, but you're navigating in outer space too, right? You're navigating, if you've ever driven a sports car in a racetrack, you're navigating the racetrack, right? To figure out how to make all the turns and all of that. So I think it's a navigation job.
Unknown waters. What's a great piece of leadership advice that you've heard at some point in your career that you used either today or that you've used throughout your career, leadership advice?
I guess I'd say two things. One is know yourself, be yourself, and frankly have the confidence and courage to, stick with play to your strengths and trust the team to play to theirs. And hopefully together, everybody playing their position, everybody doing their job will make the team better. And 1+1 will end up being 3, 4, or 5, right? So that's one for sure. A second one, which I deeply believe in, is say do. If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. If I do something, I tell you what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and if it's important, how I'm doing it or how we're going to do it together. And I would say one of the big things that took me a while to learn is patience, and in particular, kind of the art of being willing to go slow in order to go fast later. The willingness to diverge and listen and observe and seek to understand so you can focus and pick up momentum later. And especially when you're younger, you just want to go.
You want the results.
You want to go, and you're quick to action. And, leadership is really, it's super simple. It's like there's a thinking leadership, which, begins with strategy. There's choice making or decision making, which is a burden, a responsibility of the leader, the kind of the buck stops there type stuff. And then there's doing. And I found it quite interesting, but a lot of leaders don't really like to do all three of those jobs.
Yeah.
But it takes all three
to succeed. Is there an example at P&G where you, maybe learn from, hey, if we didn't go as fast then or could have done it differently, a certain product release or something stand out in your mind?
Yeah, there were several. One of the most vivid was after the earthquake in Kobe. So I went to Japan the second time in the end of 94. The earthquake was in early 95. It was devastating to the country, obviously, to the city, to the area. And it totally knocked out 2 of our 5 manufacturing plants, shut down a whole bunch of retail. And we had a huge, very large paper-making plant. We were making baby diapers. We were making women's feminine hygiene products. We were making adult incontinent products, and we were making tissue towel products. And these machines, paper winding machines, if you've ever seen them, are as long as a football field. They weigh tons. It's a big hunk of complex steel that's, moving at a rate that's faster than your eye can see the product being made. And every one was torn from its foundations, right? Just ripped out of the concrete. And when I helicoptered down there and spent a couple of days there, to the untrained eye, it looked like our Japanese team of engineers was doing nothing. They were literally mapping out step by step, what they were going to do first, second, third, what materials they needed, what manpower they needed, all of it. But then when we start, once all the planning had been done, then we moved to execution. We were bringing the machine online a day. And I think, I've seen this happen in a lot of other cultures, including the U.S. They would throw themselves at trying to get the first machine up and running as fast as they could, and they would take way more than a day. Okay, and they would jury rig it together. It would be a Rube Goldberg,
right? A Band-Aid for sure. Yeah.
Okay, and then they'd go to the second machine and they'd, attack it sort of the same way. And what I learned was no, detailed planning, makes a huge difference. And we reapplied that several times. I mean, we totally converted all of our laundry detergent plants at the time from making fluffy big box detergents to small compact detergents. And it was a totally different manufacturing process. We pulled out detergent towers. We put in agglomeration equipment. We did the same thing when we converted to, obviously, the pod form of cleaning products. So every time you do a major conversion, whether it's in baby diapers, whether it's in household products, especially on the engineering and manufacturing side, that's relevant. But it's also relevant on, defending a new competitor coming into your market. Everybody wants to run to the barricade and,
Right.
ready, fire, aim.
Ready, fire, aim. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're far better off planning, in detail what your response is going to be. And then deliver this response in the most impactful and coordinated, effective and efficient way possible. So yeah, I've learned it over and over again. I mean, I don't know how closely you've watched what we've done here at the Bay Park, but we spent a lot of time master planning, designing, engineering, before we did the first piece. Did the fountain garden, then we did the mangrove walk, $1 million project, $5 million project. Then we did the first phase, $25 million project. Now we're in phase 2, which has 3 parts. That'll be a $65 million project. But you build the capability, the competency, the experience, and the know-how so you can accelerate and so you can broaden, and it's I've learned it over and over again. It almost always works. There's sometimes when you have to react right away, right? There's a hurricane coming. We've got 3 days to batten down the hatches, right? Or worse, there's a tornado that just hit. We've got to get, things back online. 9/11, you didn't have time, right? I had to find every employee in the world, find out where they are, where they were. We lost a couple, unfortunately. So there's certain things that you just have to read and react immediately. But a lot of things that we do would benefit from a little bit of strategic thinking, a little bit better planning, including options, right, and contingencies. And then when you execute, you've got the resources you need. They're where you need them. They're the right, right team, right place, right time.
Yeah.
And you get it done.
Yeah, and I love that you as you said, it started in crisis, but you learned something that you're using outside of the crisis. So I think that's
exactly
important lesson for leaders. AG, what last leadership question is a big picture? I mean, they're all big picture, I guess, but what kind of legacy do you want to leave as a leader?
I'm going to try to be polite, but I hate the word legacy. Okay. So,
give me a different word. You don't have to be polite. It's all good. We're among friends.
Results. Okay. I'm into results. We wouldn't have entitled the strategy book Playing to Win if I weren't into results. And interestingly, that playing to win doesn't necessarily mean we win, somebody else loses. It means we win better. We win more. If you can win without engaging in a battle or, God forbid, a war, it's a far bigger victory, right? The old Sun Tzu thing. So no, I'm real interested in the results. I'm interested in what changed versus, when the team came in, what was the current condition? What were the current results? When the team left, was the condition better? Were the results better? And here's the really important thing. I'm interested in leaving behind a team that's stronger than the one we started with, a strategy that's more robust and more sustainable than the one we started with, operations and execution that are more capable, right, and more flexible and faster than the one we started with. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes you get small improvements. Sometimes you're lucky enough to achieve results that some people label transformations. I'm very proud of what the team accomplished in the first decade at P&G. I mean, all the stuff, right? I mean, doublings of doubling of profits, doubling of sales, tripling of cash returns, quadrupling of the market cap of the company, all of that. But what I really liked is it was a team effort. It was a total organization effort. Almost every business did better, and it's sustained. And interestingly, when I went back the second time, I was only there 3 years, and I was only in the CEO job about 2.5. And I would say we got the strategy, totally new strategy, right? We shed 8 out of 18 businesses. We shed 100 out of 150 brands, okay? And we refocused the company portfolio on what we thought we would need in the next 10 years. And we put the new leadership team in place, but we weren't seeing the results yet, right? The results came in under David Taylor a year or two after, I moved into the next chapter. But I felt just as good or better about that team effort, even though we weren't there for the results, because the fact that the next team could deliver great results, that meant, knock on the wood, we'd laid some foundations that made a difference.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, when you had to do something right, because they asked you back, the board did, for a second time. AG, we got one last question as we get into toward the end of the year here. Tell me about what's going on at Bay Park Conservancy. I know that's been something that you've been very passionate about and working on since you moved to Sarasota, I think, 5-6 years ago?
Oh my gosh, I moved to Sarasota full-time in 2010.
All right, so it's longer than
I became a resident in November of 2009.
So 15 years, but the Bay Park has been a big project. What's sort of the elevator pitch for those who don't know what's coming up at Bay Park? What is coming up?
Two things. One, in terms of building more park, right? More park for all. Transforming more parking lot and relatively gray hardscape into green spaces, green and blue oasis in a real park. We are in the midst of the second phase. So the simple way to think about it is we have about 10 or 12 acres that are open now. We're going to add another 10 acres of park. All right. We're going to put a front on the park along North Tamiami Trail. We call that the cultural district because there are 4 architecturally, culturally, and historically significant buildings on that site, from the Garden Club and the Blue Pagoda to the former Chidsey Library to the Municipal Auditorium, all of which are on the National Historic Register. So in addition to rehabilitating and recreating park, we're also rehabilitating, renovating, and repurposing these interesting buildings. So that's the cultural district. We just finished the south side of the public boat launch at 10th Street. So there's a new seawall. There are 15 to 20 much more resilient floating day docks, so you can boat in to the park or the site to one of the other attractions that's there, whether it's Performing Arts Center, the Symphony, the Arts Center, whatever. And the third piece, which in some ways is the most important, is we're going to complete a resilient shoreline. All of the shoreline from the bayou and the mangrove south to Boulevard of the Arts is resilient, is native, is natural, and it held up way better during the 3 hurricanes we had 9 weeks last year. All of the shoreline north of there took a beating. It was man-made, and much of it built, unfortunately, before the current hurricane codes. So we're going to turn all that into native, natural, resilient Florida shoreline. So think of, Mark, from the north entrance into Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall all the way up to 10th Street, and then beyond, north of 10th Street, to Hog Creek, and there's another mangrove up there. It'll be a green, resilient area. Excellent.
Big things happening at the Bay Park Conservancy. Well, AG Lafley, former CEO of Procter Gamble, thank you so much for joining us on the From the Corner Office podcast.
Great to be with you. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Business Observer from the Corner Office podcast. I'm your host, Mark Gordy. This podcast was produced by Reed Corley of the Corley Company in Sarasota. To hear more episodes of From the Corner Office podcast, go to businessobserverfl.com.